අලුතෙන් SLT Mobitel Home 4G LTE connection ගන්නායට වටිනා tab computer සහ data දීමනා. අලුතෙන් SLT Mobitel Home 4G LTE connection ගන්නායට වටිනා tab computer සහ data දීමනා. Comfort Moodiයෙන් භාගයයි කලක් පවතින අලුත් පෙනුමයි.
Making headlines tonight, neighborly gesture. Sri Lanka signs $1 billion credit line agreement with India to purchase essentials. No truth. The President's office rubbishes Cabral resignation report, assures fullest confidence in central bank governor. Leave politics aside. CWC leader calls for an unified apolitical effort towards a crisis solution.
Whatever said and done, yes, there are problems that could have happened due to mismanagement, there are problems that could have happened due to person A, B, C, but at the end of the day, this pandemic is bigger than politics.
No supply. UNP leader says devaluation without an IMF dollar guarantee, the root cause of current woes. All this and much more coming up tonight on First at 9. This Thursday, the 17th of March, 2022.
Nelly මතකෙන් ගිලිහුණු black shiny කෙස් කලඹක රහස sunset black shine සමගින්.
From AdaDerana, this is AdaDerana First at 9. Live from Studio 24 in Colombo.
A warm welcome. I'm Indiva Riyamuat. Now, India has stepped in with a $1 billion credit line for the purchase of essential goods and services that go a long way in Sri Lanka sorting out its shortages. According to the agreement that was signed today during a meeting between Finance Minister Basil Rajapaksa and his Indian counterpart Nirmala Sitharaman, Sri Lanka will be able to use 75% of the $1 billion to purchase goods and services from India and the balance 25% for purchases from other countries.
Sri Lanka signed an agreement for a $1 billion credit line with India that aims to help ease crippling shortages of essential items, including fuel, food and medicine. The agreement was inked during the ongoing visit by Finance Minister Basil Rajapaksa to India, where he held talks with Prime Minister Narendra Modi and other key officials of the administration. In a social media post this evening, Foreign Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar explained that this was part of India's Neighbourhood First policy, where India stands with Sri Lanka. The signing of the agreement came about during a meeting between Rajapaksa and India's Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman. With the $1 billion Sri Lanka will be able to import essential medicines and food items, of which 75% will be allocated for goods and services from India, but the balance 25% will be permitted for goods and services from other countries. In addition, the Finance Minister also met with India's Cabinet Minister of Energy, Raj Kumar Singh. Sri Lanka's foreign reserves have hit near critical levels, having fallen by 70% since the beginning of the pandemic, and the country has been looking at various means of shoring up its balance through bilateral swaps and loans. Meanwhile, in his national address yesterday, President Gotabaya Rajapaksa pledged to work with the International Monetary Fund to find a way out of the crisis. Finance Minister Basil Rajapaksa is expected to head to the United States early next month to hold talks with the IMF and present a plan for Sri Lanka's recovery.
United National Party leader Ranil Wickremesinghe says that the country's delay in seeking International Monetary Fund assistance at the beginning of the pandemic remains one of the key reasons for the country's current economic woes. Speaking during an interview on social media, Wickremesinghe also blamed current forex issues on the manner that the rupee was floated by the central bank, that is without an assured supply of US dollars from a financial institution such as the IMF.
20 ඡන්දෙදි මම කිව්වා අපිට IMF එකට ගිහින් ඩොලර් බිලියන 4ක් ගන්න වෙයි කියලා. 20 21 මේක තවත් උග්‍ර වුණා. රටවල් ගණනාවක් එවල ගියා. අපි ඒ අවස්ථාවේදී ගියේ නැහැ. 2015 අපිට ඇත්ත වශයෙන්ම දිනු කරන්නට කියලා වැඩසටහන් කීපයක් තිබුණා. නැගෙනහිර පරියන්තයට ඩොලර් මිලියන 500ක් තිබුණා. සැහැල්ලු දුම්රිය මාර්ගෙට ඩොලර් බිලියන 1.5ක් බිලියන 2යි. ජපානයේ ඉන්දියාවේ කරපු LNG බලාගාර දෙකට මං හිතන්නේ බිලියන 1.5ක් දෙකක් තිබුණා. ඇමරිකාවෙන් තව බිලියන 4 400ක් 500ක් දුන්න MCC එකට. ඉතින් මෙතනම විතර බිලියන 5ක් විතර. ඒකට චීනෙන් ගන්න තිබුණා, යුරෝපීය සංගමයෙන් දෙන්න තිබුණා. ඉතින් මේ එකක්වත් අපි වියදම් කළා නැහැ. මේ ඔක්කොම අහුසි කරා. ඒ කියන්නේ 2020ට තිබුණ ආයෝජනය පටන් ගන්න තිබුණේ ඔක්කොම නැවැත්තුවා.
The former premier also explained that the floating of the rupee without assuring a guaranteed supply of US dollars has led to the current crisis, with the central bank having placed the full responsibility of sourcing forex on the shoulders of the country's banks.
IMF උපදෙස් වගේක් දීලා තුන අධ්‍යක්ෂකවරුන්ගේ එකක් ක්‍රියා කළා හරියන්නේ නැහැ. එතන කිව්වේ ක්‍රමානුකූල රුපියල ආපහු වෙළඳ පොලේ අගයට යන්න. ඒ එක්කම තව එකක් කිව්වා. පීඩාවටපත් වෙන කණ්ඩායම් වලට සහනයක් ලැබලා දෙන්න කියලා. අපි ඉස්සෙල්ලා කරේ එහෙම තමයි. අපි හැම වෙලේම IMF සංවිධානයට ගිහින් එකඟ වෙලා ඒගොල්ලෝ දෙන මුදල කියනවා. ඊට පස්සේ තමයි අපි රුපියල පා කරේ දෙපාරක් විතර. ඉතින් අපි IMF එකට ගියාම දන්නවා අපිට සහනයක් එන්න තියෙනවා. ඉතින් සැපයීම වැඩි වෙනවා කියලා. ඒ නිසා තමයි ඒක ස්ථාවර භාවය ඇති වෙන්නේ. මෙතනදී සිදුුනේ මහ බැංකුව තීරණය කරා මේක කරන්න. මෙතන ඇත්ත වශයෙන්ම ඩොලර් වලට උවමනාකම් තවත් වැඩි වුණා. ඒකට සහතික වෙන්න කණ්ඩායමකුත් හිටියේ නැහැ. අපි ඉස්සෙල්ලා කරේ සහතික වීම අපි කරලා දුන්නා. ඊළඟට ඉතුරු මුදල් ටික හොයන එක බැංකුව වලට බාර දුන්නා. දැන් මේ සියල්ලම බැංකුවට බාර දීලා තියෙන්නේ. ඒ නිසා මේක සිදු වෙන්නේ.
The President's office was prompted to issue a statement denying media reports that Central Bank Governor Ajit Nivard Cabral had been asked to resign with immediate effect. The statement called the report untrue and rejected claims that the International Monetary Fund had made the Central Bank Governor's removal a prerequisite for its assistance.
A media report that claimed that Central Bank Governor Ajit Nivard Cabral has been asked to resign from his post caused some confusion in government circles. The report cited unnamed sources who claimed that the central bank governor's resignation had been stipulated by the International Monetary Fund as a prerequisite for the extension of technical assistance to Sri Lanka. This was alleged to have been communicated during talks between an IMF team and President Gotabaya Rajapaksa on Tuesday. However, the President's office has issued an official statement rejecting the report and the claims that the IMF had called on his resignation. The statement explained that talks had only been focused on the monetary issues faced by Sri Lanka. It added that the government has the fullest confidence in the central bank governor and had explained that there was no need to seek his resignation. Further, the President's office has called for a correction to be published by the media outlet forthwith. It must be noted that the International Monetary Fund does not hold a mandate to call for such changes in a country's key officials tasked with monetary responsibilities.
Well, earlier tonight, speaking at Hyde Park, State Minister of Estate, Housing and Community Infrastructure, Jeevan Thondaman, said that the midst of a national crisis is not the time for taking decisions that weakens the government. He added that the government remains open to solutions and suggestions for the country's opposition parties. However, this was yet to materialize.
The government has been facing both internal and external opposition in the past few weeks over the management of the country's economy. Shortages and price increases have hit the public very hard, just as people felt a bit of relief when the pandemic began to wane. With 11 parties within the coalition currently having pitched their own tents, Sri Lanka's political landscape seems to be as tenuous as the economy. General Secretary of a key coalition partner, the Ceylon Workers' Congress, State Minister of Estate, Housing and Community Infrastructure Jeevan Thondaman spoke to Indivari Amawatta on our current affairs program at Hyde Park, where he revealed his party's stance.
Now, many parties aligned with the governing party coalition have distanced themselves in recent times. What is the view of the Ceylon Workers' Congress? Does your party have any concerns in the way the government has been operating?
The 11 parties are being led by senior parliamentarians, senior politicians. But as for the views of the Ceylon Workers' Congress, what has to be understood is that even though we are with the government, we are a coalition party. Tomorrow, if we are not happy with the functioning of the government, then our first option is to voice it out. Second option is to see if there's an alternative. And third option, worst case scenario, is we'll have to take a step back. But with relation to the estate community, there have been times where the Ceylon Workers' Congress has criticized the government. For example, the Muslim burial issue. Secondly, we even voiced our concern with the fertilizer issue, because at the end of the day, the Ceylon Workers' Congress does represent a majority farming community. So just because we are with the government does not mean that we are going to say yes for everything. But at the same time, we are not just going going to leave the government high and dry. Whatever said and done, yes, there are problems that could have happened due to mismanagement. There are problems that could have happened due to person A, B, C. But at the end of the day, this pandemic is bigger than politics. And this is not the time where you should leave a government high and dry. And this is a time where we should look at solutions. Now, for example, the opposition is there. There are so many other parties in the opposition. You don't see many alternatives coming out of it. They are identifying the problems. But the problems are identified even by the ruling party. We are aware of the problems. So we don't need somebody pointing it out to us. But rather, somebody could come forward and say, these are our alternate solutions. And we are willing to come to the table, sit and explain it.
In addition, State Minister Thondaman also touched on the recent mass protests organised by the Samagi Janabala Vegaya that saw thousands of people march on the Presidential Secretariat on Tuesday. He believes that the protest missed out on a very crucial opportunity.
I must give credit where it's due. The mobilization of such a huge number of people, it's something that has to be lauded. But at the same time, I have certain concerns with the protest as well. For example, the only thing that I could take out of the protest was that the main slogan of the protest was, hand over the government to us, let us run the government. But anybody with political knowledge knows for a fact that there can't be a government change right now. So the opposition, in my opinion, as a young citizen of Sri Lanka, I would have in fact expected the opposition to rather come up with alternatives. If they had, say, maybe 10 or 15 different solutions for maybe 10 or 15 different problems we are facing, and they were able to mobilize such a large crowd, and they could have brought forth those alternatives and submitted it. That would have carried some weight. That would have shown a proactive opposition, not an opposition that did a protest just for the sake of showing dissent. Was it a protest that was used to show people's displeasure against the government, or was it the glorification of one person and their party? Because to me, it seemed more of a party-based mobilization.
Details of tomorrow's power schedule coming up after this break.
Big 3.
The Public Utilities Commission of Sri Lanka has approved the Ceylon Electricity Board's latest request for scheduled power cuts tomorrow. Accordingly, areas listed under the groups P, Q, R, S, T, U, V and W will experience a 2-hour power cut between 9 a.m. and 5 p.m. and another 1-hour 15-minute power cut between 5 p.m. and 10 p.m. Meanwhile, areas under the groups A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K and L will experience 3 hours 20-minute power cut between 8 a.m. and 6 p.m. and then for 1 hour and 40 minutes between 6 p.m. and 11 p.m. The drafting of Safe Web LK, a code of conduct for global tech companies, which is a citizen-based initiative, was announced yesterday at the BMICH. Representing the government who are stakeholders of the initiative, Minister of Justice Ali Sabri and Minister of Mass Media Dallas Alhapperuma expressed the government's support for the move, which they say will go a long way in creating a safe online environment in Sri Lanka.
The preparation of a code of conduct for global social media and other tech companies publishing content in Sri Lanka, called Safe Web LK, was announced yesterday at an event held at the BMICH. The new initiative is part of an initiative by Factum, an Asia-founded tech cooperation, international relations and communications think tank based in Sri Lanka. The drafting of the code for Sri Lanka will be based on consultations with multiple stakeholders in the government, civil society, IT, ICT sector, mass media, political parties and academia. Global and Asian tech companies have agreed to engage with the process through their regional industry alliances and Asian Internet Coalition.
The need of the hour is a higher and a broader concept than mere digital literacy, which is known as the digital citizenship. Promoting digital citizenship can be one key strategy to optimize digital opportunities and to minimize adverse impacts of the digital transformation.
This freedom of expression must also have certain amount of responsibility. That's the long and short of it. When there is organized misinformation, which will result in problem between communities in the country, the manner in the public order of the day, there has to be some regulations to go back and find out who are the people who are responsible. And there has to be some remedy. One, to counter the misinformation and give the right information. If it goes beyond that, law to be applied in terms of the penal code in this country.
Taking you to business news, the Finance Ministry decided to impose a special commodity levy on several imported items including grapes, apples, oranges, dates and yogurt. A special commodity levy of 1,000 rupees per kilogram has been imposed on yogurt, butter and spreads manufactured using dairy. A special commodity levy of 400 rupees per kilogram has been imposed on all varieties of cheese, while a levy of 200 rupees per kilogram is imposed on dates, oranges, grapes, apples and other imported fruit. This special levy will remain in effect for a period of 6 months from the 10th of March. In international business, the US Federal Reserve said it was lifting its benchmark rate by 0.25 percentage points, closing the door on its ultra-easy pandemic-era monetary policy and step up the fight against stubbornly high inflation in what is likely to be a series of interest rate hikes in the months ahead. Now, the rate hike for the first time since 2018 comes on expected widespread global repercussions caused by the war in Ukraine and coronavirus outbreaks in China, creating uncertainty for the US economy. Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell had said that the plan is to restore price stability and maintain a strong labor market, but not let high inflation become entrenched. The plans represent a seismic shift in policy from the bank overseeing the world's largest economy. After the financial crisis of 2008, the Fed moved cautiously to raise interest rates and slashed them again when the coronavirus pandemic hit. In addition to rate rises, the Fed will also be winding down other stimulus, including massive purchases of Treasury securities and other assets that it started to stabilize markets at the beginning of the coronavirus crisis. Rising fuel and food costs pushed US inflation to 7.9%, the biggest year-on-year since 1982. Rising costs for energy, food and shelter drove the gains, which are squeezing household incomes. Now, in the UK, meanwhile, inflation hit 5.5% in January. The Bank of England already increased rates twice and today too increased rates. The European Central Bank said it would wind down some of its pandemic-era stimulus sooner than expected in response to the price pressures. Now, as both the Fed and Bank of England pressed on with interest rate hike plans, Wall Street was set to trim some of the strong gains made in Asia after China had signaled more support for its fluttering economy. Wall Street futures were fractionally lower after a more than 2% jump the previous day. Europe's main bourse also dipped after an initial rise, although the overnight 3.5% leaps from the Nikkei in Tokyo and emerging market stocks following China's signals took MSCI World's 3-day bounce over 6%. Meanwhile, sanctions ravaged Russia has still not managed to get a crucial payment to its bondholders, meaning a historic default may be looming, and its ongoing shelling of Ukraine kept commodity markets gyrating wildly. In the meantime, Asian shares opened higher today, joining a rally on Wall Street overnight as potential risks from Federal Reserve monetary tightening to the Ukraine war and a slowdown in China became less murky. Hong Kong's Hang Seng surged by 5.2% and Shanghai Composite Index started up at 3,215.01 points by rising 44.3 points or 1.39%. In Japan, the Nikkei soared 3.0% and touched a 2-week high, while South Korea's benchmark index opened up 51.45 points at 2,710.68. Jatika Jana Balawege MP Dr. Harini Amarasuriya is of the view that the government needs to re-evaluate how budgets allocate funds for women's issues and health, as women are deprived of essential health services. During the launch of a study titled Taxing Menstrual Health, products in Sri Lanka, a policy analysis, Dr. Amarasuriya stated that policy or research is useless unless sufficient funds are allocated and necessary recommendations are implemented to change the way things are done today.
The study taxing menstrual hygiene products in Sri Lanka, a policy analysis carried out by the Assisting Communities in Creating Environmental and Nutritional Development Project and the Advocata Institute, was launched yesterday. The study focuses on understanding the impact of the cumulative tax imposed on low-income menstruating women and girls and the costs and the benefits to the state in repealing the tax.
This issue is also to do with, unfortunately, rupees and cents. But it's also to do with the allocation of money, not only for research, but also for the services that go towards supporting women. If you look at our annual budget, you will very quickly get an idea about how much successive governments have prioritized women and women's issues, let alone women's health. There are so many services that are lacking in our country. We talk every day about domestic violence, about the lack of legal aid, the lack of shelters for women, lack of shelters for children who are facing child protection issues. You can develop as good a policy as you want, or you can do as excellent a piece of research as you want. But unless there is money allocated for actually implementing the recommendations of your study or the recommendations that come out of policies, there is absolutely no use. We have excellent policies. We have very good research done on these issues. But what I have found is that the block is always when it comes to implementation. Successive governments have consistently allocated very little for these kinds of issues, which means that then the state services are really handicapped when it comes to responding to these kinds of needs. So I think what we need to now also do is doing some kind of proper analysis of our budgets and about how money is allocated and for what, and highlighting the ways in which women's well-being, not just women's health, is being compromised because of the way we do our budgets and because of the way we think about how to allocate resources for issues that are important to us.
And in your developing story, Russia continues to wage war in Ukraine, and the city of Mariupol is currently suffering the worst humanitarian catastrophe of the war, as hundreds, if not thousands, of civilians have been trapped in basements without food, water and power for weeks. Even though Russian forces continue to allow humanitarian corridors to function and convoys have been prevented from reaching the city.
At least one person was killed and 3 wounded after the remains of a downed missile hit a residential building in Ukrainian capital Kyiv, Ukraine's emergency service said today. Footage showed the aftermath, with the exterior of a 16-story building damaged and apartments inside strewn with debris. Meanwhile, aerial footage released by the Azov Battalion of the National Guard of Ukraine showed a tank marked with a Z coming under fire as it enters the besieged city of Mariupol. The tank is seen coming under fire several times, and a man is seen escaping from the tank and running to a nearby grass bank. The video was uploaded by Azov Mariupol. Mariupol has suffered the worst humanitarian catastrophe of the war, with hundreds of thousands of civilians trapped in the basements with no food, water or power for weeks. Russian forces have begun letting some people out in private cars this week, but have blocked aid convoys from reaching the city. Kyiv and its Western allies believe Russia launched the unprovoked war to subjugate a neighbor that Putin calls an artificial state carved out of Russia. Moscow says that it is carrying out a special operation to disarm and denazify the country.
Eyewitness videos showed buildings shaking in Tokyo streets yesterday as a powerful magnitude 7.3 earthquake jolted Japan's northeast coast of Fukushima. Now, the quake was felt in Tokyo, some 275 kilometers away, where the shaking of buildings was long and pronounced. Thousands and hundreds of homes in the capital were plunged into darkness for an hour or more, although power was fully restored by the early hours of Thursday morning. Authorities have now cancelled an earlier tsunami warning. Just before midnight, the quake hit off the coast of Fukushima, perfecting at a depth of 60 kilometers, the Japan Meteorological Agency said it sparked memories of a devastating earthquake and tsunami in March 2011, a week after the disaster's 11th anniversary. And that's it from us tonight. Have a pleasant evening. Good night.